Welcome back to the Dialed In Angling Podcast, presented by Strike Master Augers, Onyx Fish, and St. Croix Rods. Last call for Minnesota walleyes. The inland walleye season closes this Sunday, February 23rd at midnight. You know, it's just reflecting back on the season as a whole, particularly the ice season. We've had great conditions. We've been able to fish pretty much since the beginning of December, all over the place, whether you like fishing Red Lake, whether you like fishing Mille Lacs, Winnie, Leech, all of Vermilion, all of the great inland waters in Minnesota. And of course, border waters will continue to stay open as we get into March here. It looks like we're going to have plenty of ice. This cold snap itself is behind us, which is good. I don't know that I could take another day of nasty weather. It's been great for making ice, so I don't want to sound like the complaint department, but it wears on you when you're out here every single day, whether it's chasing bites for Dialed In Angling or guiding, getting up in the morning when it's 20 to 30 below and getting gear ready and getting people excited to get out fishing and staying mobile. It becomes a challenge. And as you get towards the end of the season here, where let's say the walleyes in particular, the bite windows get very narrow from, let's say you get that first half hour, 45 minutes in the morning, and then you get high sun, high pressure, cold weather, and then you get that last 45 minutes in the evening. You've got to find creative ways to catch fish all day long. Again, we've talked about it on several podcasts. It's nothing new, but Mille Lacs Lake, obviously these perch, when we're out on Mille Lacs, chasing perch all day long to kind of fill in that void because the walleye fishing has been a little bit slower. But other lakes, you know, it seems like after this February full moon, if you will, the bite really slowed down for me as far as the walleye bite during the day. Like, I know other people, I follow social media. I follow other people like Jason Mitchell out in North Dakota, some of my friends in South Dakota, even up into Canada. It seems like this February full moon and this last cold front sort of zapped things. But as we get towards the weekend here, certainly things should start to pick up. The weather is changing. I cannot wait for this warm up here. This 30, 35, even 40 degrees is definitely a gift, if you will. We've got plenty of ice now, so it'd be nice to melt a little bit of the snow and start to get into some really good March fishing. I'm hoping we start March with a bang. February is by far my least favorite month to fish, at least for walleyes. I don't mind pan fishing. I like chasing crappies. Like chasing bluegills, perch in March. But in February walleye fishing can be some of the most challenging fishing of the season. But as soon as you start to have these warm-ups, it seems like we turn a hard corner. And unfortunately for Minnesota inland walleyes, it closes right about the time that it starts to get good, but there are plenty of ice fishing opportunities out there if you want to chase walleyes. You know, like I touched on border waters. If you look at the regulations, border waters for North Dakota, South Dakota will remain open. Same with up at Lake of the Woods. That bite just gets better and better. You know, it's been several years since we've had good late ice up there where you could ice fish well into March, even getting close to that April timeframe. I know there's been years past where some anglers will go out ice fishing in the morning and then they'll come in, launch their boat in the rainy river and catch fish in the afternoon on the rainy, which is kind of a cool, unique thing to do in itself. And it's always a timing thing, kind of towards the end of March as you get into April, but it is very, very cool and great fishing opportunities there. I know border waters as well. If you look out towards, Big Stone, Travers, a lot of these lakes along the South Dakota border, the bite gets really good as you get into late ice. And out there's lots of opportunities, not just for walleyes, but also panfish as well. So tons of ice fishing opportunity left. We've got lots of time left because of these big cold snaps that I've been obviously sick of at this point, but certainly great for making ice. We talked last week about needing an extension. That's still the case. Almost every lake that I've been to this week, you need that extension, especially if you're bringing your wheelhouse up north this weekend. Throw the extension in. If any retailers have any extensions left, if you see them on the shelves, you're going to want to grab those things. We talked about it last week, and it holds true. It's really been a very, I would call it normal ice year in the sense of making ice. It hasn't been colder than normal. It's just coming off of the 2024 ice season. Maybe me personally, I'm just kind of a wimp compared to last year, because last year at this time, I mean, we were catching walleyes extremely shallow. Things were way more advanced. It seemed more like April fishing than February fishing. I just see some of my, kind of Facebook posts or looking back a year ago today type of posts, and we didn't have any snow on the ground. It was close to 50 degrees. So I know last year was the first time I had ever put a four-wheeler through the ice or even gone through the ice, but it was at the landing. So full disclosure, it's not like I went through the ice, but it was in February still, even early March, where the landings were already starting to get soft. And so I had actually punched the four-wheeler through. Nothing I couldn't get out of. I hit the throttle, was able to kind of just drive out with ease. But the landings at this time last year were rapidly deteriorating. That's not the case this year. As I look out onto the lake, there's tons of wheelhouses, there's tons of vehicle traffic. Even with the snow we've gotten from central Minnesota to the border, you can still get around with trucks and vehicles. Pretty much go wherever you want. Obviously, on the bigger lakes, watch out for ice heaves. I know that's been a big headline for people. If you look on social media, you see trucks going through and you think, how could vehicles be falling through when it's been this cold? Two reasons. One, they're either hitting channel areas or current areas, or they're going through ice heaves. Number one thing as a fishing guide, when I've got customers out, when we're moving around on the ice, if there's a crack or an ice heave, avoid it. As we get into the weekend and into next week, it's going to go from, 20 to 30 below to 40 above. Things are going to cut loose somewhere. And if they do, just making sure that you're using good judgment. You're not crossing those things with vehicles. You're not crossing those with wheelhouses, and you're going to be in good shape. For me, I've, again, knock on wood, I have never gone through the ice. I've never gone through the ice where I've had even a close call for that example. I've never had an experience where I've worried about going through the ice. But certainly ice heaves have kept me from fishing areas that I wanted to fish. But I've always used good judgment. I don't cross cracks. I don't cross heaves. If I do, I make sure it's a good crossing and there's a bridge out. That's why I always tell people, if you're coming up to a lake like Mille Lacs, Leech, Winnie, Red, Lake of the Woods, Vermilion, any of these large fisheries, go through a resort. They plow roads. They have the infrastructure to get you out there safely and get you off safely. As we get towards the weekend, there's a lot of different events going on. There's a lot of people going to take advantage of fishing our lakes to try to capitalize on walleyes before that season closes, or capitalize on pike before that season closes. So with the warm up, just expect there's going to be a lot of ice anglers out everywhere. With a banner ice year that we've had coming off the last two ice seasons, people are coming out in droves, and this weekend is probably going to be the busiest weekend on all of our lakes, as we look towards the weather, because I know a lot of listeners out there are like me. They're absolutely sick of this cold weather. I've been looking at this 10-day forecast for about 10 days now and counting down the days until we hit this upper 30s, almost 40 degrees, as we're going to encounter this weekend. But having said that, be careful on the ice because things can really change with that ice. It's really going to be booming. If you're out there this weekend, you're going to notice it. Not that it's going to be unsafe, but you're going to hear it making a lot of noise with the warm up. Luckily, we've got snow on the ice right now because that sun's getting a lot more power. And what happens is that ice starts to pop. Ice expands. It's sort of like throwing ice cubes in a glass of water or a soda, for that example. Throwing that ice cube in there, boom, she pops, right? As soon as that warm up hits. It's no different with the ice conditions when it's been this cold for this long, and then all of a sudden you get a warm up, things are going to start to shift and move. So just be conscious of that. And guess what? If you go out of a resort instead of just bawhing across the lake, going out of a public access, you're going to be in good shape because most of these resorts have a ton of equipment, whether it's loaders, plows, snow plows, tractors, bridges. They're going to get everybody in and out safely. We got plenty of ice, no need to worry there, but having, kind of those safe conditions or that backup if you need it to get in and off the ice is going to be key. I think for me, there's a couple different lakes that I would go to kind of experience great fishing right now. I know Lake of the Woods stays open for several different weeks, but Lake of the Woods is always a good option. They're still biting up there. I talked to a few friends of mine. It slowed down a little bit this week with the cold weather, but they still caught fish. They still had limits of fish. They caught decent saugers. And so if the bite is that good during this big cold smell, imagine as we get towards the weekend and things start to warm up a little bit, the fish really should be biting very well. Red Lake, I keep hearing good reports on Red Lake, especially in the evenings of catching walleyes. And then, of course, as we get towards March, we're starting to see crappies show up on Red. That's becoming, I would say, a storyline that's really not capturing giant headlines, but certainly on social media. I've talked to other friends of mine that are starting to catch some crappies. So as we get towards the weekend, but especially as we get into March, if you're looking for great crappie opportunities, Red Lake is right up there. Mille Lacs Lake, as we get into this last weekend, there's always a ton going on Mille Lacs Lake. Various resorts are having different things going on. Two main events that happen on Mille Lacs Lake this last weekend has always been the Perch Party out of Hunters Point, formerly the Perch Extravaganza. That kind of went away during COVID, and Hunters Point kind of picked up the pieces, and now we're at the Perch Party. And that goes on Saturday out of Hunters. You can fish all over the lake, so you don't have to go out of Hunters Point. You just have to weigh in your fish there. They've got a ton of prizes. Later in the podcast, I'm going to be talking to Justin Baldwin to get details about the Perch Party. So if you're interested in that, that's always a fun event. There's always thousands of people that come out for good reason. They give away a lot of awesome prizes. So stay tuned on the podcast. We're going to talk to Justin in detail about the Perch Party at Hunters on Mille Lacs Lake. Another giant contest, this one's more of a derby style contest, is going on out of Garrison. You can access out of Garrison Sports or Miramar. And basically it's $40 at the event, $40 per hole. It's fishing for ducks. Now, again, that's more of a derby style, so you can't fish all over the lake. There's holes drilled, but lots of great contest prizes there. I know they give away just an absorbent amount of prizes, so that's a big draw. So depending on whether you're on the east side of the lake or on the west side of the lake, there's lots of events going on Mille Lacs. If you want more information for the Fishing for Ducks, go to fishingforducks.org. They can instruct you on where they're going to launch, the times the derby begins, what kind of prizes they're giving away, and what to expect over there. But lots going on Mille Lacs Lake. I know, like I said earlier, it's going to be one of the busiest days on the ice, or the busiest weekends on the ice to date, not just for Mille Lacs, but a lot of different places around the ice belt. Let's talk about some fishing, if you're coming to Mille Lacs or if you're going to Vermilion, to Winnie, to Leech, let's talk a little bit about some techniques I know that I'll be doing to put walleyes on the ice for this last inland weekend. It can be tough. And now coming off this cold front, I'm a little bit negative on walleyes just because it's been a little bit of a tougher bite. Especially after the full moon. It seemed like that February full moon, the fish were biting at night, and then it just kind of killed the day bite. But it also coincides with this big high pressure system, this big cold front. So what we've been doing to put fish on the ice is primarily drilling a lot of holes and moving around. I know it's tough to ice troll outside and fish outside when it's been this cold, but we've been moving the wheelhouses a lot. We've been moving the otters a lot, and we just kind of keep moving on fish. So I use my live scope. I get out to structures, whether you're fishing let's say like a mud flat, a gravel bar, a big break line. And what I've been keying in on are the deeper sides of these areas, whether it's on Mille Lacs, whether it's on Winnie, whether it's on Leech. I've been really keying in during the day in deeper water. So sliding off the edges, getting into those basin areas where you're getting lots of bug activity, you're getting invertebrates popping. There's lots and lots of bug activity going on in those deeper waters. And I've been really downsizing to catch the walleyes. It's amazing while we've been like perch fishing, for example, on Mille Lacs, or even perch fishing like on Winnie. It seems like we catch a lot of walleyes, or a lot more walleyes, on the small tungsten with Eurolarva, the spoons tipped with the Eurolarva, even versus the minnows and the dead sticks during the day. Now, towards evening, and even in the mornings, those peak feeding periods, definitely having the dead sticks out, the spoons switching back over to tipping them with minnow heads, and getting up shallower on the structure, whether it's just moving adjacent up on top of the structure or actually moving entirely up into shallower water, anticipating those peak feeding periods, but doing it in a time period where you're not going to be spooking fish. So if I were to lay out a timeline for like how my day is going, what we do is we get up early in the morning, and right now it seems like it's starting to get light about 6:30. So you got to get out there about 6 in the morning. We're getting set up about 6. We're picking up our customers, getting them out in the houses, keying in on those peak feeding periods. But I'm fishing a little bit deeper in the mornings than I'm fishing, let's say, when I'm setting up in the evening. So I'll set up on the bottom edge of the bar, the mud flat, the gravel, okay? And I'm setting up on that basin, where I would call basin, where it's just before it starts to jog up onto structure. So that last contour line before it slides up. Or it might be a small flat that's adjacent to the structure, and setting up on that and letting those fish cruise up on top of that thing before they go out and do their thing during the day and kind of wander off. It seems like these fish will visit these structures in the evening, and then they find a spot to slide out into the basin during the day. And so those flats are good areas. Also inside turns are good areas. But anywhere where those fish are coming and going from the structure in a high percentage, where you're going to get lots of eyeballs looking at you as they slide into the basin. Now, once they get out in the basin, if I'm moving around during the day, I'm targeting that basin area, not just on Mille Lacs Lake, but on a lot of other lakes as well, because the basin's holding a lot of fish for good reason. One, the water's a little bit warmer. For two, there's a lot of invertebrates and bugs that are popping right now. And so there's lots of forage out in that area. And so it's attracting a lot of bait fish. So you're getting jumbo perch out there. You're seeing ciscos out there. You're seeing spot-tail shiners, burbot, lots of different species of fish that are targeting that basin during the day. But also we're targeting those fish while the walleye bite has slowed down, if that makes sense. So we're fishing there from, let's say, 7:30 in the morning until about 3:30, 4 o'clock, even 4:30. It doesn't seem to be getting dark until almost 6 now. And so about 3:30, depending on how far we have to travel to get set up into our evening spots, we've been kind of wrapping up in our deeper basin. And when I say basin, I'm just saying deeper water adjacent to structure, but leaving those basin spots and then getting set up in like a shallow water situation. Now, if I'm leaving my wheelhouse out overnight, or I'm fishing into the evening, or I'm ice camping, I'm going to get set up real shallow, because it's amazing how many big fish are in under 15 feet of water right now, and how many numbers of fish are in 15 feet of water right now or shallower, whether it's rock piles, it could be up on flats, even weedy areas up on top of flats. This year, without snow cover for most of the winter, a lot of that vegetation's really green, and actually there's quite a bit of oxygen still in the water this year. Unlike some years where we have thick ice, thick snow, oxygen levels get low and those fish kind of leave those shallow water areas, we have lots of oxygen right now. And so a lot of those fish are coming up into that shallow water well into the evening, into the night. But in order to catch those fish, you got to be extremely quiet. You can't have 3-4 wheelhouses up there with generators running, people moving back and forth, kids running around. If you're going to set up shallow, if you're going to ice camp, if you're going to use your wheelhouse up there, you need to shut off that generator before it gets to that 5:30. Leave that thing off until 7:30, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, until you've got to turn that thing back on, either to charge your house or whatever, but keep the noise to a minimum. I know I run off of battery power during peak feeding periods, just to keep that noise down. Also, keeping the live scope off of fish sometimes in that shallow water when they're finicky. If the fish are biting and they're basically jumping through the ice, they don't care about live scope. They don't care about sonar. But when they're really, really finicky, like they have been over the last week with this cold snap, keeping the noise down, not only with your generators, but also your live scopes, your sonars, that thing. I've been going back to just using a Markham 2D sonar in the hole, and it seems like we're catching more fish. Even during that cold snap during the day, we had to tell customers, like, turn your live scope off. Just use the Markham sonars, and they were catching more fish. It seems like the pinging from that, even with the perch and the panfish, there's days that they just don't like it. They won't come in. Whereas, if you're turning those machines off, you're going to put more fish topside. That's a conversation that I'd like to have to dedicate an entire podcast just to talking about that, because we see it a lot in open water where you're shining on them or you're pointing your live scope at fish and they don't like it. They start to skimp off. A couple things that you can kind of key in on to realize if the fish are not liking it or not is if you shoot at them, if they instantly move, to get that sonar off them. So what we do is, like, if we see them, we pull it off of them, and then we kind of drill holes out around them, and we'll check on them to see where they're at. The other things we do is just, like, if we know fish are in an area, let's say we're fishing a little depression or an inside turn, or we're fishing a basin, if we'll go around, if we know there's schools of fish in that area, we'll just kind of leave them alone, leave the live scopes off, kind of hole hop with the 2D sonars, or set up in the shelters with the 2D sonars, like, your Markham LX7, for example, or any sort of flasher, and just set up on them with 2D sonar and just leave the live scopes off them completely. You'll get more fish that'll come into you. They're less disrupted by the signal. That definitely is the case if you're fishing that shallow water. So just to get back to that topic where I'm talking about as my day progresses, mornings, getting out there bright and early, especially on a weekend like this where you're going to get a ton of traffic, you're going to want to get out there at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, get set up before that peak feeding window, or even if you're coming up for the weekend, come up Friday where you still have some daylight and get out and get set up on some of those. I would call them, kind of your last break line, whether it's a flat, an inside turn, get set up there because that's going to be a good morning bite. And then with the warm up, you'll be able to hole hop all day long, chasing perch, chasing walleyes, regardless of the lake you're fishing. being mobile this weekend and getting away from people will be easy to do because of temperatures. And then you can leave your hard house or your hub house set up on that high percentage area. That way you can hole hop all day long. You can come back to your house, get all set up about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and then maximize your fish catching as you get into the evening. Now, if you're fishing a lake like Red Lake or Lake of the Woods, for example, where it's kind of structureless, what I would do is get up and get out into those areas a little bit deeper. Like Red Lake, I would get out into that 10, 11, 12 foot area and kind of get set up away from everyone else, where there's not a lot of noise. You can certainly look on the snow right now if you don't have a lot of truck tracks around, there hasn't been a lot of holes drilled, getting set up there and then kind of hole hopping from there and then coming back to your location later. Or, there's times where you set up on Friday, you realize that spot wasn't that good. You didn't have a great evening bite that Friday. You didn't have a good morning bite. So then as you hole hop throughout the day, you're finding locations where you want to move your house, you want to move your hub house, you want to move your wheelhouse to. And then, if you find them there during the day and they're biting during the day, even if they are out in a little bit of a basin, if there's any sort of structure around there, or if there's numbers of fish out in that basin, that's where you're going to want to get set up and get your all your gear and everything moved. I always say travel light if you're going to hole hop. All I do is especially now it's easy when you're driving the truck around, I'll drop the wheelhouse off and then I'm driving around. I've got, basically a forward facing sonar in my truck. I've got a Markham, a rod, a little bit of bait and a bait puck, but that's all I'm running with. I don't carry all my gear. I leave that all back at the wheelhouse. I leave that all, kind of tucked away until I'm ready to find fish. And I'm telling you, finding fish like in late February like this and finding active fish in late February can be a real challenge. And so if you're coming up to any lake this weekend, try to get up early on Friday, do some research on the front end, try to find areas where you're away from the crowds, but you can still find good numbers of fish. So if that's out in a basin, I would literally just drill holes with my live scope and look around and say, oh, there's some fish over here. There's some over here. There's quite a few in this little quadrant. Pick up and move, check other areas, but then narrowing down your search to, okay, this area had a lot of fish on it. That's where I'm going to set up. Or if you're coming to a lake like Mille Lacs, Winnebagosh, Leech, where there's tons of structure, doing the same thing, but keeping your search around structure areas for walleyes, if you will. And I like to have structure that I have deep or adjacent deep water access this time of year, where I'll get set up with my hard house, but then maybe it's only a couple hundred yards where I can access deep water. And then I can start looking for perch, for walleyes out in the basin. I have like a daytime area that's not too far from all my stuff. So if I want to run back and grab lunch or check on the family or whatever it may be, I'm not miles and miles away from my wheelhouse. The other thing with that, especially if you're traveling by yourself, yes, you can get around pretty easy, but there is some snow. There's some snow drifts, especially around the rough ice, or if anybody's plowed a road and drifted in, you don't want to get stuck and be miles away from your wheelhouse, your family, or anything like that. So that's kind of my mindset into getting set up as we get towards the end of walleye season here. I wish everybody good luck this weekend. Try to stay away from the crowds if you can. There's a lot of fun things going on. You're going to want to stay tuned. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm going to be talking to Justin Baldwin of Hunters Point. We're going to do a deep dive into the Perch Party and what you can expect if you're coming up to Mille Lacs Lake this weekend to capitalize on the last call for walleyes as we get into the last weekend of the season. Stay tuned for more Dialed In Angling podcast. onX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Download the app today to get fisheries information in the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin, along with research tools for serious anglers and beginners alike. Filter lakes by species, trophy only, keeper fish, abundance, or all of the above. Plan which lakes to fish with the app, navigate to the accesses, and once you're there, use the onX best-in-class weather imagery and fishing hotspots to catch more fish. onX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you would never known existed. onX Fish, the app that is changing the game on ice. Okay, my next guest up is Justin Baldwin of Hunters Point Resort. Justin, I talked earlier in the podcast that you've got the big Perch Party going on this weekend. Always an annual event here at Hunters Point to kind of close out the season, if you will. It's kind of the last hurrah for walleyes. The theme of this podcast is last call for walleyes. But really the headline all season, we've talked about it on several different podcasts, has been the perch on Mille Lacs. And so I think this Perch Party in particular is obviously near and dear to my heart because I'm glad the perch are back. But I think a lot of people are going to be coming out in droves, and it looks like you got a lot of help from Mother Nature.
I agree, Tone. Thanks for having me, and I'm super excited to talk about the Perch Party because we are pumped for this weekend. And Perch Party every year is something we obviously look forward to, but this year, like you said, maybe a little bit more, just because everybody's coming out in droves to find the perch, and it's going to be a lot of fun seeing these people run around and chase this perch and see what comes in at the end of the day, because there'll be some big perch.
Always. It always amazed me over the years, like when the perch populations were fantastic, like we're seeing now. It was always amazing to me the size of the perch, because I know a lot of our customer base over the years, I can think in years past when they would come in with giant perch. I mean, like 14 inches, and we'd be in the top 10, for the first hour, and then all of a sudden get knocked out of it. And you're like, how can anyone have bigger perch than what we just brought in? I remember bringing in, and several years we made the top 10 with our customers, but I remember a couple years coming in with like 14 and a half, 14 and a quarter, those size fish, and we didn't make the top 10, or if we did, we were kind of in that lower tier top 10.
This year, I think too, Tone, it's going to be 14 and a half inch is, you're going to have that to even come weigh your fish. And last week we did a small one, and 1.71 won that. And that is just a tenth of what the people that are going to be out fishing for this tournament. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see these people out, and the weather's going to be great. So, those people are going to be out running around and hole hopping and doing what you need to do to find these big perch.
That 1.71 number that you touched on last weekend, Hunters Point had a perch and pout hunt,
exactly. Yep.
You've had for years. But always for me, it was like that 1 pound, 3/4, 1 3/4, 1.75 to 1.81, 1.9, just kind of skirting around that 2 pound mark. And I think if you're coming to the Perch Party, that should be your goal. You should be 1.75, I think, is going to be kind of the minimum to get on the board. That's just my guess. If I were to guess, is that kind of pound, 3/4. You're going to need one pushing close to 2 pounds. And the tournament itself is just part of the contest. I know you guys, sell buttons or sell tickets or however you arrange it now with the Perch Party. But, the contest itself is part of it. You can fish all over the lake, bring your perch in to be weighed, and there's cash prizes for that. But then the real prizes are obviously the door prizes that you give away here at Hunters. Can you explain the whole process? How much is it to get a ticket? How much is it, for the drawing? And then also lead us into the perch tournament as well.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The perch tournament is obviously a part of it, a big part, but it's not everything. And, the fishing attracts a lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of people running around fishing. But the biggest part of it is the drawing after the tournament. So the fishing starts from 8 a.m., goes till 2:00. So you have to have your fish in by 2:00, and then 3:00 is when the drawing starts, and everything's going to be right down here in the harbor. So come out, and we will have prizes. The top prize is a wheelhouse. We've got a side-by-side. We've got 2 4-wheelers. We've got a bunch of live scopes, grills. I was counting. I think there's a total of like 150 prizes, and these are no slouch prizes. Even the ones at the end there are great prizes. So there's a lot to do for that. Also, this year, kind of a fun thing that my wife threw in there was a onesie contest. So you got to wear your best onesie. And I'm excited to see Tony dressed up in a onesie.
Not going to happen.
For this. But yeah, everyone wear a onesie, and my wife's got a good prize for that too. So they used to do a hat contest. So this year will be kind of fun to see people dressed up in onesies. So if you can't tell, the fishing tournament's a big part, but the party and everything is at the drawing. There'll be concessions. We'll have drinks. We'll have food, and it's just kind of a last weekend of the year. Kind of thanks to everybody. Everybody comes in and make a party of it. Make it a lot of fun.
I was keying on the fishing tournament, just because I'm a guide, and a lot of my customers over the years would come up here, and that was their goal, is we'd go out and we'd perch fish for the fishing contest. And we had a lot of customers over the years that placed, and so for us as fishing guides, I mean, that was all. I was always keying in on the fishing part of the perch party. But now and always the drawing was the draw, right? When you'd have 5, 6, 7, 8,000 people standing around the harbor as you give away prizes. Some pretty significant prizes for the drawing, to have a wheelhouse that you're giving away. So for the fishing part, 8 to 2, right? They have
Correct.
to weigh in by 2. You can fish all over the lake. So you can fish anywhere on Mille Lacs Lake. You just have to come back in and weigh your fish in. And FYI, if you're going to weigh your fish in, I always kept mine in like a bucket or an Ingle cooler, trying to keep them alive. Those fish lose some weight. A lot of them are spitting up bugs, and everything counts as far as weight when you're weighing these things in. So you don't want your fish to weigh less. It's kind of like, I always look at it like fishing a walleye tournament. You don't want your dead fish. Your fish that are dead weigh less, so if you can keep them alive. And I always tell people too, if they're fishing out in front of hunters here, if they catch a decent one, come and weigh it in. Don't wait until the end of the day when it's frozen solid. It always seems to me, if you can get them weighed in right away, they're going to weigh more.
Exactly. And we will have somebody in the weigh station starting at 8:00 too. So there'll be a sign here at the resort. It'll be in our bait cleaning shack, is where we do the weigh-ins. So if you know where that is, otherwise there is a big sign on it, but you get it, bring it in right away. Like you said, it's going to have the most weight right away, and why not get it in there?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's going to be a lot of big weights. We talked about that, but the drawing now, if you've never been to the drawing, it's something to see. Justin was talking about the onesie contest. There used to be a hat contest with the craziest hats, and people are very creative. I will say, I've come into the harbor for 20 years straight for the perch parties, and it was always amazing to me, the hats that people kind of made on their own.
It's fun to see the creativity of these people.
For sure. So the onesie part will be cool. The weather looks fantastic this weekend. We finally get a break in the weather. I said it earlier in the podcast, I need this mentally.
Exactly.
Dealing with this kind of weather as a fishing guide when I'm out there every single day. And, as you get into February, the bite can be really up and down anyway. And to have these kind of temps and weather, I just can't wait for this weekend. I can't wait till next week. I've been looking at this 10-day forecast for the last 10 days, counting down like it's a countdown towards Christmas.
I totally agree. And you think perch fishing's been good now? Just wait. I'm super excited to see this good weather and get rid of some of that snow, and hopefully these perch really start popping again.
Now, as far as the drawing is concerned, what do people need to get as far as a ticket, a button? How are you guys doing?
Yes. So in years past, we'd always had done a button, and this year we've brought Camp Confidence in. So it's a charity now, and we do a raffle ticket. So you come in, you buy a raffle ticket for $20. That gets you into the fishing tournament and the drawing as well. It's $20 for that, kind of get you in everything, and all the proceeds now goes to Camp Confidence. So that's a lot of fun to have a charity like that, get behind this, and doing it like we're doing it now, and they walk away with a couple bucks for the camp, which is a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, that's great. Camp Confidence Learning Center, I've done a lot of fishing tournaments over on Gull Lake over the years and different fundraisers for Camp Confidence. They're a great organization. They're no slouch to fundraisers as well. I mean, the Brainerd JC's tournament, they help out with a lot of different things, and they're a great cause. It's a great reason just to come out to the Perch Party, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. And that's it's just so much fun now to see that money going. It's going to a good spot, and Camp Confidence has been a lot of help getting the prizes and get everything organized. So really excited about that.
Right on. Lastly, let's just touch on road systems. I've been fishing Mille Lacs here for the last, 2.5 months on and off. I've been all over the ice belt, but the road systems out of Hunters are great. You got a lot of spots for wheelhouses. I talked earlier on the podcast about the amount of traffic that's not only just going to be on Mille Lacs, but all these lakes, because of the warm weather, because it's the last weekend, you can fish walleyes. This is sort of the last hurrah for a lot of people with wheelhouses, even though we've got a ton of ice and it looks like we're going to have ice for several weeks now. You'll be able to kind of get out with your wheelhouses. When you come to Hunters Point, pull down to the harbor if you got a wheelhouse and come in the bar restaurant. They've got a great map full of, all their areas that they're fishing and all the road systems that they have out there. When they come in, is the raffle ticket separate than your road pass?
Yes, so I'm glad you touched on that, Tone. So we will actually have a booth down on the ice. So if you do show up, we will have a booth down on the ice that is able to sell you a road pass and sell you the raffle tickets as well. We also have sweatshirts for the Perch Party that you can get down there. So if you want to come in the bar, we'll sell them in there, obviously, like you do every week. Otherwise, we will have it down on the ice too, so you can elude some of that traffic on, Friday night, Friday afternoon kind of stuff. So we will have somebody out there doing that. And the raffle ticket is separate from your road pass. So you do need a road pass and you need the raffle ticket. You need the road pass to fish on our roads. So if you just come in and buy a raffle ticket and go out somewhere else to go fishing, you don't need a road pass then to come for the festivities on Saturday. So, I hopefully with that booth outside now, everything moves along a little bit quicker, so you can get out in your fishing spots a lot quicker.
Right on. Thanks, Justin. So if you're heading to Mille Lacs Lake, you're going to want to check out the Perch Party. It's out of Nitty's Hunters Point Resort. Justin Baldwin, thanks for sitting down on the podcast. Good luck to everybody fishing this weekend. Stay tuned. We got more Dialed In Angling podcasts coming your way. The Dialed In Angling podcast is brought to you by St. Croix Rods, handcrafting the best rods on earth for an elevated angling experience since 1948. St. Croix Rods are truly a world-class brand that has earned the respect and admirations of anglers across the planet. I trust St. Croix Rods, and you should too. Check them out at stcroixrods.com. Okay, so the last portion of our Dialed In Angling podcast for this week, I'm just going to talk about what you need to bring, up to the lake. If you're coming to Mille Lacs for the Perch Party, what you should expect. If you're fishing other lakes for this last weekend of walleye season. I talked a lot about locations on the beginning of the podcast, but now I want to talk about techniques and then also just lures, presentations, that sort of thing. I'm a huge fan of downsizing this time of year. It just, like I said earlier in the podcast, it's amazing how many walleyes that I catch when I'm out in the basin chasing perch or even just chasing walleyes during the day, but how many walleyes I catch on a small jig in tungsten, small jig in plastic, a very small spoon, and even just a few Euro larvas on there. That's why I love like that roach rattle spoon with the marabou. If you watch Dialed In Angling, if you listen to the podcast, if you've seen these spoons, they have a ton of action with very subtle movements, right? And a lot of it has to do with that marabou hair. We have it in our hatchet spoon from VMC as well. You've got the marabou. It gives it really lifelike action without even moving that bait. But this time of year, when things get tough, when the bite gets tighter, I like to downsize to like that 30-second out size, okay? So I'm using, that really small roach flutter spoon with that marabou hair. Another jig that I really like and has quickly become one of my favorite go-tos from VMC would be the bull spoon. I absolutely love the bull spoon in the smaller sizes this time of year. That split ring on top and the way that thing fishes really heavy kind of mimics a lot of invertebrates and bugs that are hatching. If you start earlier in the season, I love jigging wraps, ripping wraps, slab wraps, some larger spoons, big flutter spoons, big baits, big profiles. This time of year, I tend to downsize. And I will fish those smaller spoons and using either a minnow head or Euro larvas or even just kind of that marabou hair on there sometimes is all you need to trigger these light biting fish. I'm also pounding the bottom a lot more. And then, of course, like we talked about last week, dead sticking. Having those dead sticks down with smaller minnows on there, either small shiners, fatheads work great, or even small suckers. But what I like to do is I like to get those baits really tight to the bottom. I know most of the time when I fish clear water, I set my dead sticks up high. But this time of year, I'll either pin them to the bottom, and you can use, with your dead sticks, you can use like a drop shot to do that. Or you could take your minnow, hook it from the dorsal fin. If you're using an underwater camera, this works great. It's a really kind of deadly dead sticking technique, but actually I'm hooking the minnow behind the dorsal fin like you normally would with a really small, just plain VMC octopus hook, dropping that down to the bottom, and then setting that bait so that minnow has to kind of work its way off the bottom. You can even slide that hook back from the dorsal fin a little bit and hooking it almost in the tail so that head's up, but that tail keeps sweeping the bottom and kind of stirring up the silt a little bit. It drives walleyes crazy. It drives perch crazy. If you want a dead stick for perch in particular, by kind of hooking that minnow back a little bit and then pinning it to the bottom so that minnow has to try to fight to get up off the bottom, you won't believe the amount of bites you get with that by just changing that a little bit, that presentation a little bit where you're dropping it to the bottom. So it's actually, the minnow is actually touching the bottom. And if you look at it with an underwater camera, you will see the fact that it is sweeping the bottom with its tail and it's stirring up the bottom. The fish, it drives the fish nuts. If you're ever fishing with like a Markham camera, for example, and you're getting fish that come into your dead stick and looking and they're not biting, try that technique. You're going to put them topside. The other thing is downsizing that. Roach rattle spoons, bull spoons, the bladed bull spoon. I'm a huge fan of that bladed bull spoon that came out this year when we were out in Devil's Lake. I fished it when we filmed the winter camping. I fished that almost exclusively at the beginning of the season. I'm a huge fan of that bladed bull spoon. It not only attracts perch, crappies, walleyes absolutely love it. It gives it a little kick, a little more flair. The other bait that I use all year long that I absolutely love for a horizontal presentation is a jigging wrap. Okay, like a number 3 or number 5 jigging wrap. Most of the time in the winter, I'm using like a number 5, but I'll go down to a 2 or a 3 this time of year. And same thing, just like with the minnows, I'm really beating the silt, beating the bottom with those baits, and then bringing them up slow. And I'm trying to trigger bites. I'm trying to draw fish to my location. The other thing that you can do to draw fish to your location, if you're set up in one spot, and you're going to hear me out here, is get a number 5 or a number 6 jigging wrap, a number 5 or a number 6 rip and wrap, a really loud rattle bait, okay? And doing the same thing, punching the silt with that thing and then bringing up and just ripping it really hard, making that loud vibration, drawing those fish to your location. I do it a lot to draw perch schools in, but I do a lot for walleyes. In clear water, I like to use really bright, silvery gold type of baits. So something with a lot of flash, they hear that rattle. If I'm in super stained water, I'll do the exact opposite. I'll still use that 5 or 6 rip and wrap, but I go to like a really bright UV color, like a bright UV pink. Even the glow colors work great. Something that you can glow up and drop down there and just really get those fish fired up. I do it a lot midday when I don't have a lot of attention, or if the fish are just kind of cruising on the bottom. If you're watching them on live scope or even 2D sonar where those fish won't quite commit or come off the bottom and then they just kind of go away, I'll drop that rip and wrap down, and I don't necessarily hit the bottom with it right away. I kind of give it a few rips up in the water column to see if I can get the attention of some fish around. If I can't get them to come in, then boom, I drop it down to the silt, rip that thing a few times, and then bring it back up and then go back to those small presentations. But if you're fishing deep, if you're willing to move around, this weekend looks like a great weekend to stay on the move and really get back to ice trolling, unlike we've been able to do for the last few weeks. But if you're able to be mobile, downsize, try a couple different presentations, and then, of course, be mobile with your wheelhouses or your nighttime setups. If you're gonna winter camp here on any of these lakes, or if you're gonna set up in a wheelhouse, hey, make sure you're staying mobile with that, just as mobile as you are out hole hopping. You're gonna put more fish on the ice. So, last call for walleyes. Thanks again for tuning into the podcast each and every week. And of course, you're going to want to check out Dialed In Angling, as we've got some new episodes going to drop next week. I'm Tony Roach. Good luck fishing, everybody. This has been the Dialed In Angling Podcast.